Suddenly, in the middle of the night, the couple was awakened by the dog. Ted grabbed a pistol and went to check what had happened. When shots rang out, Cory hid in the bedroom closet. Her thoughts were tangled. Was her husband alive? Would the intruders find her? And who dared to break into their house in the middle of the night? Help this channel grow. Like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. This incident happened not so long ago, in 2018 in Austin, Texas, and the trial of the criminals ended only in June 2023. Let's get to know the family we're talking about today. Theodore Shaughnessy, whom everyone called Ted, was born on February 7th, 1963, and was the youngest of 3 children. He had 2 older brothers named Tim and Tom. They grew up in Arizona, not far from Phoenix. From a young age, Ted was obsessed with speed, and this passion accompanied him into adulthood. He loved racing cars, karting, and everything related to fast driving. His brothers described Ted as a completely fearless person. In the early 80s, the younger Shaughnessy met a girl named Cory. They had so much in common that they soon got married. Then the couple moved to Austin, Texas, where they opened an elite jewelry business together called Jewelry Gallery. They jointly managed their brainchild. Stones and jewelry were one of their shared interests that once brought them together. Cory was an appraiser. In college, she studied fine arts and gemology, the science of gemstones. This knowledge came in handy in her work, most of which was hidden from visitors' eyes. Ted was the face of the store. His ability and skill in communicating with people made him an amazing consultant in selling jewelry. Ted was a very friendly guy, capable of establishing a trusting contact with any buyer in a few minutes. No one ever spoke negatively about him. Many clients later became his friends and continued communication on a different, closer level. People were drawn to the charming, energetic, talkative Ted. It was very comfortable to be around him because he cared most about others. His huge heart manifested in everyday actions. Ted could easily pay for groceries at the checkout for people standing next to him, lend money interest-free to his friends when they faced hard times. He liked helping people, and it was never done for show. By 2000, the Shonessy couple had built a successful business. They bought a beautiful house in a good neighborhood, not far from the store. They got 2 dogs named Bart and Brina, who replaced children for them. Cory and Ted adored their pets. They even took them to work. In the relationship between husband and wife, everything was also wonderful. They were crazy about each other. Everyone who knew them considered them the ideal couple. The Shaughnessy's lacked only one thing. They dreamed of becoming parents. The couple couldn't have their own children. So in the spring of 2000, they went to Ukraine to adopt a 16-month-old boy, whom they named Nicholas, or Nick for short. For Ted and Cory, Nick became the absolute light in their lives. They fell in love with the baby at first sight. The Shaughnessy's were wonderful parents. There was a lot of love in their family. Ted instantly turned into the most caring father in the world, trying not to part with his son for a minute. Wherever the man was, the boy was always with him. Over the years, Nick turned into a smart, handsome young guy like his father who adored speed. From childhood, they rode karts and racing cars together. Nick also began to show an entrepreneurial streak. The business acumen of his parents, who built a successful business from scratch, apparently passed on to their adopted son somehow. Even in middle school, the guy started selling chocolate bars, and in high school, he already opened a car repair business that brought in good profit. He even hired several employees. In 2015, Nick met a girl named Jacqueline Alexa Edison, or simply Jackie, who moved from New Jersey to Texas. They started dating and after graduation were practically inseparable. The young couple moved from a townhouse outside the campus to College Station. Jackie studied engineering at Texas A&M University, and Nick worked from home as a day trader, trading on the stock exchange. Every weekend, they made a 2-hour trip to Austin to visit Ted and Cory. On March 2nd, 2018, The life of this seemingly ideal family changed forever. It was 4:30 in the morning. Cory and Ted were peacefully sleeping in their bed when they were awakened by the dogs barking. This wasn't unusual. The animals could be attracted by some extraneous sound on the street, or they smelled something inaccessible to human sense of smell. In any case, a dog barking in the middle of the night is a common occurrence. Be that as it may, Ted, just in case, armed himself with a .45 caliber pistol and went to see what had happened that caught the animal's attention. Cory, accustomed over so many years to the dog's barking, put her head on the pillow and was about to continue her interrupted sleep. But as soon as she closed her eyes, she heard the sound of a shot in the kitchen, followed by several more. The woman jumped out of bed like she was stung and grabbed her own .357 caliber revolver, which always lay above the bed. Cory saw through the doorway how the intruder, approaching the bedroom, shot her beloved dog Bart. She opened fire directly at the uninvited guest and shot until she ran out of bullets. After that, she hid in the bedroom closet and called 911. Dialing the number, Cory thought that the criminal could open the door at any moment and find her. She was completely defenseless because the pistol's magazine was empty. In fright, the woman fired all the bullets one after another. Quickly reporting the emergency in the house to the dispatcher, Cory heard moans. She didn't know if it was Ted or if she had managed to shoot one of the intruders. Cory couldn't even admit the thought that while she was hiding in the closet, her beloved husband was dying there alone. She told the rescue service operator that she was going to go out and check if her husband needed her help. However, the dispatcher literally ordered the woman to stay in hiding until the police arrived. Cory's heart was breaking from pain for Ted, but she was forced to sit in the darkness of the closet and wait for the patrol car to arrive. 15 minutes seemed like an eternity to Cory. She no longer heard moans and didn't know what to think. Biting her hands until they bled to avoid screaming, clutching her head with her hands, the woman prayed to God that her husband would be alive. But somewhere deep inside, the thread of hope was beginning to break. Finally, the dispatcher reported that the police should be near her house. Cory crawled out of the closet and slowly walked down the hallway to the front door. Her path passed near the kitchen. Ted, with whom she had lived for 30 years in love and harmony, lay dead on the floor in a pool of his own blood, and several bullet casings lay nearby. As if in a fog, the woman passed by the terrible sight and opened the front door to let in the emergency response officers. But there was no one on the porch, neither police nor intruders. By bitter irony of fate, the patrol officers were knocking on the neighbors' doors at that time, having mixed up the house number. When the police finally reached the Shaughnessy residence, they saw Cory completely out of control. The woman was shaking as if in a fever. She couldn't properly explain what had happened, only pointing her hand somewhere inside and repeating one single name, Ted. At that moment, it seemed to her that life was over, and there was nothing ahead, neither good nor bad. How wrong she was. Cory was led away and seated in a patrol car while emergency response officers inspected the house. Ted Shonessy's death was pronounced at 5:14 a.m. after he was shot 4 times. Coming to her senses a little, Cory called her son Nick, who was 19 at the time, and told him that his father had just been shot. The guy, in absolute incomprehension, tried to find out what had happened, but Cory only said that right now she needed her son to be nearby. Nick and his girlfriend Jackie immediately got into the car and made the 2-hour drive from College Station to Austin, to his parents' house. They arrived around 8 a.m. and stayed there for the next 3 months, providing all kinds of support and consolation to a loved one crushed by grief. Ted and Cory had been married for 30 years. After the move, she was left alone in this big house for the first time in a very long time, without her husband and without one of her dogs, in the house where her husband was shot while she hid in the bedroom closet. Rumors about the nighttime crime instantly spread throughout the community. No one could believe that 55-year-old Ted had passed away at such a wonderful age when everything was already there and one could just enjoy life. People didn't understand who needed to take the life of such a bright person. Friends and neighbors, as much as possible, tried to help Cory overcome this pain, learn to live without Ted, a man who fully justified the opinion that he was ready to give his own life for another. It was a rare gift, and Ted deserved to live to old age. But someone decided otherwise, destroying an entire family's life at once. Investigators immediately got to work. First, they inspected the house for possible evidence. In the kitchen, where the owner was shot, they found 2 different caliber casings. Pistols of .40 and .380 caliber were used. This meant that 2 shooters were likely involved. There were no signs of forced entry. Only in Nick's old bedroom was the window open and the protective screen pushed outward. Therefore, it was assumed that this is how the intruders entered. A fingerprint was also found on the window, urgently sent for testing. There was a dresser in the room, and in its bottom drawer lay a box for a .40 caliber pistol. But the case was empty. This was the only thing missing in the entire house. It was this weapon that one of the criminals used in the shootout. So it turned out that Ted died from a bullet fired from his own pistol. Since the Shaughnesses were owners of a prestigious jewelry store and lived in this big, beautiful house, the first version that arose for the detectives was robbery. The jewelry gallery sold jewelry worth not $1,000. It was an elite store, and the price of items in it reached $1 million. The police first interrogated Nick, Cory, and Jackie, as family members might have important information. Their phones were also taken for checking. The relatives wanted to do everything possible to help the police in their investigation. The conversation with Nick confirmed his alibi, and his phone call records proved that he was 2 hours away in College Station at the time of the attack. The Shaughnessy house had a security system installed. The son had access to this system through an app on his phone because he helped his parents figure out modern technologies. It turned out that Nick's mother and father only armed the house when both left. Almost all other times it was turned off. But in fact, the security system still provided some useful information. It showed that the old window in Nick's bedroom was opened at 4:27 a.m. 17 minutes later, at 4:44 a.m., the system warned of broken glass in the kitchen. And this happened around the same time the shooting started. This meant that the criminals were in the Shaughnessy house for 17 minutes before Ted encountered them in the kitchen. During this period, they could inspect the house for what to steal. Most likely, the intruders knew that expensive jewelry, or at least cash, might be stored in this house. There was a safe in the house, and many things that could be stolen. Cory herself believed it was a failed robbery. However, the investigators thought otherwise. Because nothing was stolen except the .40 caliber pistol, the main target, in their opinion, could have been the owners themselves. The criminals knew that besides Ted, Cory was in the building. If they had broken in for robbery, they could have pointed a gun at the woman and tried to extract the safe code from her or force her to give them some jewelry or money. But they didn't do that. The detectives believed it was a targeted attack on the Shaughnessy's. The intruders were surely familiar with the family. Otherwise, why stage an attack and show up at the house without their own weapons? Most likely, the criminals knew where this .40 caliber pistol was stored. In addition, at least 3 cars were parked in the driveway. It would be clear to any intruder that someone was home. The dogs barking would also make the kidnappers retreat. So it's unlikely they would enter the house knowing the owners were inside. In Texas, almost every home has weapons. The Shaughnessy's had about 20 pistols lying in different places in the house. For these reasons, the investigators wanted to check other versions not related to a failed robbery. When they talked to Nick, he actually gave them a couple of leads to check. The guy told the officers about an incident that happened in the 90s. At that time, Ted managed a pawn shop. One day, armed robbers burst into the store and opened fire. Ted also had a pistol. He fired back and wounded one of the attackers. In the end, the criminals were arrested and put behind bars for attempted robbery. Nick said that perhaps they were released and, harboring a grudge against Shonessy, wanted revenge. The detectives studied this line of investigation, but found no evidence that the previously convicted were anywhere near Ted's house at the time of the attack. Therefore, this version turned out to be a dead end. Nick's other lead was that the neighbor, whose house the police mistakenly raided, asked the young man to conduct some investigation for her. The woman suspected her husband of infidelity and asked Nick to follow him for a certain fee. At her request, the guy even installed a tracker on the neighbor's car so the wife could see his movements during the day. According to Nick, this man might have learned about the surveillance and wished death on his wife or the one who revealed the secret to her. Perhaps he hired people to get rid of his spouse. And they also mixed up the house, breaking into the Shaughnessy's. This version was far-fetched, but if the police mixed up the houses, why couldn't the criminals make a mistake? Among the 3 cars parked in front of the Shaughnessy house, there was a white Mercedes. The neighbor also drove a white Mercedes. Her house was nearby and also unlit. In the dark, it was easy to confuse 2 buildings standing close by. The detectives went to the neighbor and asked what she thought about it. The woman fully confirmed Nick's words that she had paid him several times for surveilling her unfaithful husband. But she was absolutely not worried about her life, since her husband would gain nothing from it. Moreover, the man was unaware that Nick was watching him from time to time. So the lead with the vengeful neighbor also turned out to be dead for the investigators. Since there were no more viable versions, the detectives turned their attention to Cory and began considering her as the main suspect. There were many strange coincidences that needed to be explained somehow. The first and biggest question was why the robbers left the woman alive, even though they knew she was in the house. Moreover, she shot at them until she ran out of bullets. So why didn't they try to find her and force her to give the safe code and hand over the savings? The investigators also asked Cory about the .40 caliber pistol that disappeared from the case in the dresser drawer. And she told them that they had a lot of weapons in different places for protection. Most likely the pistol was somewhere in the jewelry store. However, during the search there, it wasn't found. It couldn't be found in the house either. The widow assured that there were gun safes in different rooms, and she didn't remember where what was. The fact that Cory was clearly nervous only strengthened the police's suspicions. Also, Cory was the sole beneficiary of Ted's life insurance policy for $1 million. After her husband's death, the woman soon tried to cash in this insurance policy. Ted was the face of their jewelry business, and Cory struggled to stay afloat without him. She called the insurance company and asked when they would pay her the money, to which she received the answer that they couldn't cash the policy because she was a suspect in her husband's death. That's how Cory learned about it, and it was a blow below the belt. While she desperately tried to come to terms with Ted's loss, they decided to accuse her of his death. Not only would she have to close their business, Ted's legacy, but now she was under close scrutiny from law enforcement. She and Ted were one whole, and now Cory had to learn to live without him. Besides that, the widow had to somehow prove that she had nothing to do with her husband's death. Then, on top of everything she had to go through, she received some more important news from the detectives. During the search of Nick and Jackie's townhouse, the investigators found their marriage certificates. It turned out that the young people had secretly married 8 months ago, in the summer of 2017, and they didn't bother to tell Cory or Ted about it. The mother learned about her son's marriage from the detectives investigating the case. No matter how offensive it was to her, she welcomed Jackie into her home with open arms. Cory wanted the girl to feel like a member of the Shaughnessy family, so she threw a party for the newlyweds and also gave her daughter-in-law a diamond pendant as a kind of wedding gift. Planning this party distracted Cory a little from all that unbearable pain that was burning her from the inside. And another pleasant distraction was that together they tried to save the family business. Nick agreed to work at the jewelry gallery instead of Ted, and Jackie took an academic leave from university until the end of the year to help the Shaughnessy's cope with the difficulties. After all, now she was part of their family. Meanwhile, the police received the results on the fingerprint found on the open window in the house. The results matched an employee of a window and door manufacturing company who had previously installed windows in the Shaughnessy house. This person didn't even live in Texas. He lived in Minnesota. It turned out that the lead led nowhere, but the police were sure that the intruders entered the house through this window. They remembered that when interrogating Nick, the guy mentioned how he himself had climbed in and out through this window many times, so his parents wouldn't notice. It was a kind of emergency entrance and exit. When the detectives asked him if anyone else knew about this window, he unhesitatingly replied that his friend, Spencer Patterson. In fact, Nick didn't have many friends. He had known Spencer for a long time and they were very close, since he was the only one who knew about Nick and Jackie's marriage. Nick told the detectives that Patterson wasn't as lucky with parents as he was. His friend worked at a hated job that he couldn't stand, and at the same time was getting an education in Texas. So the portrait of Spencer drawn by Nick made the detectives wonder if a less fortunate friend, who knew everything about the Shaughnessy family and experienced financial difficulties, could have broken into their house for robbery. The officers also didn't give up hope of finding the .40 and .380 caliber pistols used in the shooting. In a conversation with Nick, they managed to find out that he had given Spencer a .380 caliber pistol. The police used the information and went to talk to Nick's friend. For the most part, the young man was very frank with the detectives. He confirmed that he knew about the window because he and Nick often entered the house through it. This happened when they had a little to drink and didn't want the mother or father to find out. The investigators also searched Spencer's house and car and found a .380 caliber pistol in the car, given to him by Nick. But ballistic examination showed that this weapon was not used in the attack. Mobile phone records also showed that the guy was not near the Shonessy house that night. Although the detectives really believed that Spencer was hiding something, he definitely did not participate in the crime against Ted, so all suspicions were lifted from him. However, the chain of Patterson's interrogations actually led them to a new suspect, Nick Shaughnessy. The investigators couldn't help but notice that it was he who gave them Spencer's name, casting a shadow of doubt on his friend. It was he who told about the armed robbery incident in the 90s. He reported about the neighbor and her unfaithful husband. It was he who directed the detectives in a million different ways, none of which yielded results. On one hand, it might seem that the son just wanted to quickly find the person who took his father's life. On the other, his versions, along with his other actions, raised more suspicions. Nick behaved too strangely after his father's tragic death. The detectives had been watching the entire Shaughnessy family from the beginning, including Cory, Nick, and Jackie. And the guy's strange behavior manifested literally from the first seconds. On the day he arrived from College Station to the family home, he behaved inexplicably. It seemed that Nick was not at all upset by his father's death, but excited by the prospects opening up after his death. When he was asked to turn around to test for gunshot residue on his hands, the guy did it with a jump, like an excited schoolboy unable to contain his emotions. He joked and laughed, which the police considered a strange way to express emotions after his family had just experienced this unimaginable tragedy. Nick immediately told the police that his parents' house had a security system and that he could access it through his app, turn it on or off. The townhouse where they lived with Jackie also had an alarm. At the very beginning of the interrogation, Nick showed the investigators a video recording proving that he and Jackie were at home at the time of the attack on Ted. Emergency response officers reported that upon arriving at the scene, Nick went straight to that window in his old bedroom and studied it for a long time. That morning, and in the following days, the young man showed excessive curiosity. And if separately it looked like concern for his father, together it painted a not very good picture. The guy walked among the police and asked them a bunch of questions, interrogated the neighbors himself, as if trying to find out every bit of information. In addition, it became known that the parents had lent Nick $30,000 for stock trading, and he hadn't returned them yet. A friend of Father Ted Cole also provided him financial support and gave $5,000 for investment on his behalf. Mother and father also paid for some of his monthly expenses, such as car insurance, gas, and the like. Ted and Cory didn't want Nick to get used to living at their expense, so they made something like an agreement that the son would later return this money to them. At first it was so, but then he stopped returning the money to his parents. Mother and father incredibly supported all his endeavors and did everything for their son to succeed in life. But refusing to return money for his own expenses definitely created huge tension in the relationship. In the Shaughnessy family, disputes often arose about this over several months preceding Ted's death. The thing is, the parents didn't want Nick to engage in stock trading. They hoped that after moving to College Station with Jackie, he would get tired of sitting at home and also enroll in university to get an education. The $30,000 were allocated to him as a student fund. The father warned his son that as soon as this amount ran out, they would stop financing him, and Nick would have to get a job and support himself. Most of all, the parents didn't like that the money was going not to monthly needs, but to buying new things for Nick and Jackie. Every time the son and his girlfriend appeared in their house, they had new fashionable outfits and boasted about how they furnished their apartment. For this reason, mother and father decided to completely cut off the money flow, and Nick didn't like it very much. Once they even had a serious fight, but then everything worked out. The young man started returning the money again and stopped wasting it left and right. Despite the fact that the situation was resolved peacefully, the detectives found it suspicious. They searched Nick and Jackie's apartment and found a box of ammunition there. The brand and caliber of the bullets matched those found at the crime scene. The box was missing 6 bullets. Upon further study of Nick and Jackie's records, they also discovered that he had lied to them about the last time he was in Austin. The guy told the police during interrogation that he hadn't visited his parents for a month before the attack. However, his mobile phone records showed that, in fact, the guy was in Austin on February 28th, 2 days before Ted's death. In Nick and Jackie's mobile devices, there was a rather obvious gap when they simultaneously didn't use their phones or deleted records for that time period. For 19-year-old young people, constant immersion in phone screens has become an integral part of life. Therefore, the absence of records simultaneously for 2 hours raised questions for the investigators. Either Nick and Jackie deleted something or simply reset the settings, but they didn't even bother to remove the information from other devices, probably forgetting about synchronization possibilities. Most modern people know that when you delete something from your phone, it never disappears without a trace. There are specialists capable of recovering even deleted information. That's what the detectives used. They found everything that was missing on the mobile phones. It became completely clear why Nick and Jackie wanted to erase this from the mobile's memory. There were quite compromising messages sent a few days before the incident at the Shaughnessy house. They pointed to a conspiracy for contract killing, and it was about certain amounts that the young people had to pay someone in advance. Also, the deleted correspondence from the phones showed that the newlyweds were in a much worse financial situation than Nick's parents assumed. Among the records were also messages from the neighbor reminding Nick that if he didn't return the $2,600 she owed him, the woman would go to Ted and Cory and tell them everything. Even screenshots of the banking app were deleted, where it was clearly visible that their bank accounts had less than $2. Nick's phone records showed that he accessed his parents' home security system at 5:39 a.m. It turns out he already knew that an attack had been made on his parents' house. It's unclear why he then put on a show when Cory called him and told him about his father's death. Nick pretended to be shocked by the news, although in fact, he was already aware that something had happened in the house. Essentially, he had no need to access the security system early in the morning, and if for some reason he did access it and saw that the house had been broken into, he would have tried to contact his parents himself and warn them. Investigating this case, the detectives called Nick's friend Spencer Patterson for interrogation again because they felt the guy was hiding something from them. And during the second interrogation, Spencer said that once Nick, knowing he needed money, offered to pay him for killing his parents. He boasted that after their death, he would receive an insurance payout of $1 million for each, and he would also inherit their house and jewelry business, worth about $6 million in total. Almost 3 months later, on May 29, 2018, Nick and Jackie were arrested on charges of solicitation, punishable by death. Cory didn't know the information the detectives had, so she was shocked by what was happening and convinced it was some mistake. She thought the detectives had targeted her son just as they had targeted her before. The woman firmly believed that Nick, whom they loved so much, supported and gave all opportunities to become successful and need nothing, couldn't do something like that. Imagine your husband and your dog being killed almost before your eyes, and then your son and his girlfriend, who supported and comforted you during the hardest and most traumatic time of your life, being accused of organizing the assassination. And this seemed like complete madness to Cory. 2 weeks later, Jackie was released on bail, and for the widow, this was almost a relief because the woman thought the mistake was starting to resolve, and soon her son would also be free. Unfortunately, it wasn't so. The detectives knew that Nick and Jackie themselves were not responsible for the attack. They were at home when the crime was committed against their closest people, but they were aware of the impending killing. Thanks to surveillance cameras, the police were able to track 2 men entering Nick and Jackie's house on February 28th, just 2 days before the incident. It turned out that a person named Johnny Leon asked his acquaintance Cameron Vosmer to help the young couple with the move. When they entered Nick's house, Cameron heard that it wasn't about moving at all. In fact, the young man wanted his parents' death and offered a large sum. Vosmer refused to participate in this and left the apartment. The detectives managed to find this man and thus get on the criminal's trail. 21-year-old Johnny Leon was arrested and interrogated. At first, he denied everything, but when presented with irrefutable evidence, he broke down and told about the attack and the conspiracy. Nick offered him $100,000 to kill his parents. For Leon, the sum was significant, so he agreed. That same day, they drove with Nick to Austin, parked across the street from the Shaughnessy house. And the guy was going to do it himself. Nick even approached the house, then just returned to the car and said he couldn't do it with his own hands. They drove back to College Station and developed a plan for the terrible crime on the way. This whole story was confirmed by Nick's phone location records, and Johnny Leon's mobile showed that on the night of the attack, he was in the Shaughnessy house. His conversation records led to the second perpetrator, a person named Arian Smith. The guy also pretended to be innocent until something human spoke in him. Smith confessed and even demanded the death penalty for himself. After the shooting in the Shaughnessy house, he felt so guilty that he stopped sleeping at night. Smith said that if he took someone's life, he deserved death himself. It was he who fired the fatal shot at Ted, and he really used Ted's own .40 caliber pistol, which Nick Shaughnessy gave him. According to Arian Smith, Nick turned off the home security system for them and told how easy it was to enter the house through the window of his old bedroom. After the arrests were made and all the information came out, Cory finally lost all faith in Nick and Jackie. It was undeniable that they were involved in this. In 3 months, Cory had practically lost her entire family. Her husband was shot at the instigation of their own son. From the moment the Shaughnessy's brought Nick into their home, they loved him with all their hearts. He became their whole world. And this person, whom Ted loved so much, calmly, without any remorse, sent his father to the other world. It was madness that they had adopted their own executioner. Cory couldn't wrap her head around the fact that she had unwittingly lived for 3 months with the people who took her husband's life. She bought groceries, paid all the bills, dressed and shod those who, in essence, completely destroyed her happy life. Jackie decided that it was in her interest to cooperate with the investigation. The girl put all the blame on Nick's shoulders, saying it was his idea, and she didn't support it, thinking the guy was just talking nonsense. She allegedly couldn't even think that he would dare to attack his own parents. According to Nick, Lately, his father was depressed, so by taking his life, he practically did him a favor and relieved him of mental torment. Cory wouldn't be able to live without Ted, so it would be cruel to leave her alive. That's how the son reasoned when looking for killers for his parents. All of Jackie's testimonies were nothing more than an attempt to justify herself. The deleted messages from the phones showed that the girl was aware of the impending crime. Nevertheless, she calmly lived all these 3 months next to Cory at her expense. Together with the woman, she mourned the deceased Ted, knowing that they and Nick were guilty of his death. However, for the information about the crime, Jackie was released on bail. She returned to student life, started going to parties and dating other guys. Nicholas Shaughnessy, Johnny Leon, and Arian Smith were charged with a serious crime with a lethal outcome. In April 2021, all 3 men pleaded guilty in exchange for a sentence of 35 years in prison with the possibility of parole. In June 2023, Jacqueline Alexa Shaughnessy, aka Jackie, agreed to a deal and pleaded guilty to attempted conspiracy to commit murder. The court gave her a so-called deferred adjudication. In Texas, this means that a person can plead guilty to committing a crime and receive probation, but ultimately not be convicted of that crime. Jackie had to spend only 120 days in the county jail. For the next 10 years, she will be on probation. Then every year on the anniversary of Ted's death, she will have to return to jail for 2 days. Last year, Nick Shaughnessy gave several interviews where he said he would never have committed the crime without Jackie's support. The guy also sincerely repented that he was so selfish and caused pain to the people who gave him everything. He admitted that he had a perfect life, a perfect family, and he destroyed it all in one moment. He repaid with black ingratitude. Nick is working on himself and hopes that someday his mom will forgive him. Cory hasn't spoken to Nick since his arrest. Instead, she writes him letters that she never intends to send. She will always love her child, the way he was, not the one who sent criminals to his family's house. In essence, Cory is also dead because of her son, and ghosts cannot speak. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.